Welcome to the Local Initiatives and Transportation Alternatives Program Workshop. My name is Jason Price. I'll be administering both of the programs, and I'm also the TIP coordinator. Let's get started with the program. I'll go over the agenda for the scoring criteria. I put together an interactive map that I'll go over, and the first thing we'll go over is the program overview of the contents of the program, some of the details about the program, and what's covered. So with that, let's get started. The Local Initiatives and Transportation Alternatives Program is in line with our long-range transportation plan, which will be adopted in December 2019. There's goals and objectives that are in our long-range transportation plan, and those 5 overarching goals are preserve, safe, efficient, connected, and a multimodal network. So those are the 5 overarching goals that this program is aligned with. So you'll see in the scoring criteria that we try to find projects that move the needle towards addressing these goals and objectives. In addition to the long-range transportation plan, the TPA adopted their first Vision Zero Action Plan. So in the Vision Zero Action Plan, the governing board adopted a target of 0 traffic-related fatalities and injuries. And so what we did was we took some of the goals and objectives from the Vision Zero Action Plan and incorporated them into the scoring criteria for the Transportation Alternatives Program. So you'll see that embedded into the scoring criteria, and the layers that are reflected from the Vision Zero Action Plan are in the interactive web map that we'll cover later on in the presentation. And also, if you want to read the Vision Zero Action Plan or see the full document, there is a resource at the bottom of the page. It's www.palmbeachtpa.org/safety, and that's where you'll find the full document. There's a distinction between the Local Initiatives and Transportation Alternatives Program in that if you're deciding to deliver your project on your own as a LAP certified agency, you will be required to have an Americans with Disability Transition Plan. You will be required to have an ADA transition plan depending on which program you apply for, but to get more information and to be more aware of what is required for each program, follow up with us and we'll provide more information on ADA transition plans, what is required for each of the programs. And we also have additional information on our website at www.palmbeachtpa.org/ADA. And that's the best place to go to find out what's really required before you get started on applying for a grant. So important dates, a few things have changed from last program cycle. We incorporated a few additional requirements and took out some other requirements. So just to go through, the first thing is pre-application meetings. Before application are due on February 28th in 2020, there will be a pre-application meeting that will be scheduled between now November 4th and January 30th. So between November 4th and January 31st, it's required of all applicants to schedule a one-on-one meeting with the TPA and FDOT to go over the project before you apply, to vet the project and have a discussion on all of the aspects of the projects in terms of, right-of-way, eligibility of the project, and any questions that the applicant might have. That would be the opportunity to ask the TPA and FDOT, and vice versa, of the FDOT and the TPA to ask the applicant any questions about the potential project that an applicant is interested in applying. The next piece is after the applications are due, there will be an email chain to go back and forth between the applicant and the TPA and FDOT to continue to vet the project and ask questions and get additional information about the project. So that'll happen. The first email will be in March March 27th, and the second email will be April 27th. So there'll be some time in between, and the time in between there'll also be the field visit, and that's where FDOT and about a dozen of their staff, all specialists in different fields, will come out, look at the project, and meet the applicant in the field and go over the project in detail in the field and take a look at the project and ask questions. And that part will happen in between the two emails that will go back and forth. And that'll just benefit the applicant and the project to really take a hard look at the project on the ground and continue to ask questions before and after. And then lastly, something to keep in mind is resolutions from the governing board are due April 30th. And that's about 60 days after the application deadline, which gives you a couple months to draft a resolution, bring it before your governing board, get it passed, and submit it to us by the deadline of April 30th after the application deadline. Just to go over the two programs in a little more detail of the overarching purpose and the differences between the two programs. The first one, local initiatives, that's a larger program with a total funding amount of $20 million. It does utilize SU funds, and it has a broader scope of projects that are eligible. And just for further information, there's a link at the bottom for FHWA to give you more information about the local initiatives program. And the other program is Transportation Alternatives. That's a smaller program that's more geared towards non-motorized infrastructure projects and safe routes to school projects. The total funding is about $3.1 million annually compared to $20 million for local initiatives. And we've provided a website at the bottom as a fact sheet from FHWA to give you additional information about the funding and about the program. Some of the projects that are eligible in both of the programs. First, the local initiatives, because it has a larger amount of money dedicated to it and it has a wider range of projects. You can see there's complete streets projects, but there's also transit capital projects, purchasing buses, non-motorized infrastructure like sidewalks and bicycles, very similar to the Transportation Alternatives program. But in addition to that, there's freight efficiency projects that are eligible. So you could find projects that address issues on an evacuation route, or projects that are within a port, or transit-specific projects. They would only be eligible under the local initiatives program. For transportation alternatives, it's mostly geared towards non-motorized transportation projects, and you can see from the list on the right, they're pretty much non-motorized driven, like recreational trails and bike and pedestrian infrastructure. Some other details and differences about the program. I mentioned before, the maximum amount for each project for local initiatives is $5 million per project, whereas transportation alternatives, it's a smaller maximum of $1 million. The minimum amount per application is $250,000, and that's for both programs. And when it comes to design funding, transportation alternatives can only be done through local implementation, so you have to be lab certified to deliver the project, and so the design would be done by the local municipality, whereas for local initiatives, FDOT could design and implement the project, or the local municipality could fund the design, but it's still constructed by FDOT. Lastly, the design and construction horizon for each of the programs. Local initiatives is a 5-year time horizon, so your construction year is in 2026 and your design is in 2024, because it's there's a longer lead time of 5 years. Where transportation alternatives, it's only a 3-year turnaround to construct a project, and because they're smaller in scope and size, Your design year is 2022 and the construction year is 2024, just 3 years out. Next, I'd like to go over the required documentation. So in the overview that I provided, the last sheet has a submittal checklist for reference to let you know all of the required documentation that you need to upload to have a complete application. So the first one is the application itself. That's on our website. You can download, complete that, have it signed, and then submit that as the first part of the application submittal process. The other items are pretty straightforward. It's a local map, which is an aerial map, a typical section, which you can use street mix in order to recreate, and we'll go over those slides further on. We'll go over each one of these in detail. Just going over them briefly here. Right-of-way ownership verification, and then the resolutions of support. Those are due on April 30th. Detailed cost estimate, that's another item that you'll find on our website. There's 2 different ones, depending on how you're going to implement the project, whether through LAP or through assistance through FDOT. There's a different cost estimate sheet for both, and they're both identified on our website. And that's something that you would download, complete, and upload as part of the application submittal process. Lastly, another item that is new this year is a commitment letter from the administering agency's public work or engineering department. This is a new requirement just to make sure that there's support by the agency that will construct the project, whether it's in-house within the agency that applied, or if somebody else like FDOT is going to administer the project. This just indicates that the person doing the work is prepared to dedicate the resources needed to deliver the project. And because there is a longer lead time for local initiatives, it's 5 years out, it's good to get the implementing agency, the engineering or public works department on board to acknowledge that they're willing and able to do the work when the time comes later on in the process. Lastly is photographs of the project locations before the project is constructed. We'd like to follow up and get after photos too once it's constructed and in operation. And then lastly, letters of support and public outreach. That's due at the time of the application deadline, and there are specific requirements for projects that are immediately adjacent to single-family lots. So if your project is adjacent to single-family lots, there will be specific requirements for public outreach. Other than that, it could be just due diligence of doing your public outreach and providing that as supplemental information of we've went out and spoke to everybody that could be potentially impacted by the project and they are in support of it. Just be cognizant of the requirements for single-family units if they're immediately adjacent and you would impact their ability to use their driveway or the street that they live on, because it's primary access. Next is the application walkthrough. So with the application walkthrough, there's 2 ways to implement a project. And so right when you open up the application and you look at it, you'll see that there are indications probably in the bottom part of the first page of who will do the work in the project. So the 2 options are through the local agency program, the LAP program, where the municipality will implement the project completely on their own through a LAP agreement, or if it's a transit project, you'd have to be approved. There's an approval process to go through in order to do that, and there's a few recipients to apply for transit projects, and that's SFRTA and PalmTran. So that's a specific project for transit projects. However, the bulk of the projects will be done as infrastructure projects, either through the local municipality or FDOT. And you can see at the bottom, there's 3 different scenarios for FDOT to deliver the project, whether they're designing and constructing it or doing a variation of that. And also if it's on the state highway system or off the state highway system, that is also a distinction. So we'll pull up the application and just walk through the application. The applications are slightly different for the Local Initiatives and Transportation Alternatives program in that, depending on how it's being implemented, some of the questions will be slightly different. But for the most part, the questions that are in the applications are the same. It's just the slight variations of how the project is implemented. That's the main difference. So right from the beginning, just a project title, who is applying for the project, and what do you want to build? This is your kind of executive summary snapshot of what are the merits of the project, what's the scope, where is it, what type of facilities are you proposing, in a brief synopsis. And then a critical element is who owns the right-of-way, and certifying that there is enough right-of-way, and that'll be another requirement in the upload of the application is right-of-way certification. We're asking that question up front of who owns the right-of-way, just to get that out of the way early. Then is who's doing what, and this is the part that might be different for each of the applications for local initiatives. This is where you'll identify how the project is going to be implemented, who is doing the design, who is doing the construction, and how will it be funded. Next is some basic information in terms of applicant contact information, the project location, and some of the qualifying activities for funding, just to identify what category does this project fall under. Is it a transit project, a non-infrastructure project, a complete streets project, or freight? So there's different categories. Continuing through the application, you get to the project typical section information. When you have an infrastructure project that's on a roadway, this is where you'll enter in the numbers for the types of facilities that you're proposing. So you'll list what the existing conditions, what the existing right-of-way is in terms of the roadway profile, and fill in those numbers. And you'll see at the bottom that there's a total width of all of the components. That'll be your total right-of-way width. And so as a fact check, as a test, the existing and proposed total width right-of-way should be equal to one another, because you cannot acquire additional right-of-way as part of the project. So they should be equal, and the differences should be between the existing and proposed when you're adjusting the right-of-way to accommodate more facilities or different types of facilities. The next page is the project scope of work. This is where you'll go into a little more details about different elements of the project if they apply to your project in terms of access management, ADA, accessibility, pedestrian facilities and lighting, landscaping, signalization, transit improvements, school zone modifications. If your project has any of these elements, this is the opportunity to explain that a little further and provide that information. Continuing with the questions, there's public involvement and support. There's an opportunity to describe how you went about doing the public involvement, what it entails, what are some of the results, and maybe it's in addition to the public outreach information that you upload as part of it, as part of the application. And then lastly, project maintenance of, how will the project be maintained after it's constructed, and who will be responsible for that. And getting close to the end is the cost estimate. So with the cost estimate, this will be a decision of which program are you applying for and which cost estimate sheet you'll use. For local initiatives, you have the choice of both of either doing it through LAP certification on your own as a local municipality or with the assistance of FDOT. And there is a cost estimate sheet for both on system and off system, and to identify who will construct the project. That cost estimate sheet will have different elements in there that will be distinct for which avenue you choose, if FDOT will implement the project or if you will implement it on your own. And the last is just a required signature for the application. On the cost estimate sheets, there'll be a signature for engineer. So it doesn't have to be the same person. Usually the engineer will sign the cost estimate, but planner or an administrator within the municipality will sign the application and submit it. So just to go over the cost estimate sheets in a little more detail, there's two different parts of the cost estimate sheet. One is the participating cost and non-participating cost. So the non-participating costs are the local funds borne by the local municipality, and those would be items that wouldn't be covered under the grant, whereas in participating cost is everything that would be covered under the grant and funded through the TPA. So we included the statement as part of the cost estimate to add all participating eligible items in this column, regardless of the maximum TPA reimbursement amount. There is a maximum of $5 million that's reimbursable for participating items, but if you go beyond that, that just safeguards if any of these costs change over time and some of them go down or up and there's additional money available, you still stay within the cap of $5 million. You'll always be covered as a maximum of $5 million. So it's just good to put all of the participating costs in case anything changes. So there are specific fields for the quantity and the unit and the engineer's units costs. One of the things to be cognizant of is the year of construction you should consider that when putting down the cost for all the items that will be included in the project. So that's something to consider in terms of the unit cost for each of the construction year might be 5 years out. So consider that in your unit cost. So if it is a transit project, there are two designated recipients for us in Palm Beach County, and that's SFRTA and PalmTran. And those would be the two agencies that would be able to apply for transit projects under these grant programs. And there are some additional requirements, and that's the FTA procurement process and also updated Title VI documentation. And we can provide additional information or clarification on those if you wish. Just contact us as the TPA, and we can provide additional information on these other requirements, the Title VI or the FTA procurement process. After the application is completed, the next item in the application checklist is the aerial map. So aerial maps can be generated through the Palm Beach County GeoNav. That's a website. There's a link on the side. This is a great resource to go to for a number of reasons, but specifically you can zoom into your project, highlight the area, and get a good perspective of outlining the project and what the right-of-way is, and where it fits within the county. So it's a good resource to go to get a good aerial view of your project. Next is the typical section. So for the typical section, we recommend using StreetMix. StreetMix is a free program. It's easy to use, and it'll allow you to reconstruct the existing typical section of your roadway to provide what it looks like today, and then what what the potential improvements will look like when it's constructed. So you can see the redistribution of the right-of-way and how you would accommodate bike or pedestrian facilities. Right-of-way verification, there is another website that we provide that you can get through Palm Beach County for county plats and right-of-way documentation. In this presentation, you can see on the right, that's a link that you can use for Palm Beach County. It's a great resource to find the right-of-way maps that you're looking for, download them, print them out, or just include them as part of your packet. Others have, just pulled the physical right-of-way maps, taking photos or scan them and provided those in lieu of going through this website and going through Palm Beach County. So the next item is resolutions from the facility owners. So the resolutions are kind of twofold. One is to certify the right-of-way ownership, and then also for the governing board where the project is located. So this will kind of certify that where the project is being constructed, the governing board is in support of the project, and then in addition, the facility owner is in support of the project if the facility owner happens to be different than the municipality. And this is due on April 30th, 60 days after the application deadline. So this gives you a couple months to get this documentation and bring it to your governing board as a resolution to get approved and then submit. There was another, the other documentation needed is a commitment letter from Engineering and Public Works departments from the administering agency. This will help with acknowledging that whoever is going to actually do the work and construct the project is through a commitment letter acknowledging that they will they will dedicate the resources needed to build the project. With some of these projects, if it's a lap project, then it's only 3 years, and they will probably already be on board and know about the project. However, if it's a local initiative project and maybe the timeline is longer, this just helps acknowledge that the resources will be available in later years when you get closer to construction. Or if the construction is being done by a different agency other than the municipality where the project is being built. In the cost estimate worksheets, there is participating and non-participating items that are reimbursable and not reimbursable. This just identifies what is participating and non-participating when you apply and when you fill out the cost estimate sheet. There is different sections in the cost estimate sheets. Is this a good time to?
Yeah, you can finish the slide and then I'll go to it.
Okay. So participating items, we clarified this. Landscaping can be 25% of transportation alternative costs. Non-participating, you can see work outside of the project limits, relocating utilities, removal of encroachments, extravagant roadway treatments, or decorative items. Usually there's kind of the entry-level facilities that you would see on a roadway that are like your basic elements or features. If you wanted decorative features, it would incrementally increase the cost, and that would be borne by the local municipality if it's truly a decorative or premium item that you would want to see to maybe continue a theme in a downtown or a particular area. However, if it's a type of roadway treatment that increases safety or increases visibility or is a technology addition to a project, that would be something that we would want to, that could be a participating cost because it adds to the safety of the project, or if it's a feature that adds to the project and it's not truly just I guess say for looks, I guess. It adds more features to the project. But if you have stuff like that included in the project, make a note of it, let us know about it, and we'll, through the vetting process, figure out if it's participating or not and go to FDOT and figure that part out in advance. And,
This is the lap one,
okay,
off system.
Andrew, could you go over the part of the statement that you
Sure,
put at
sure.
the top?
So, and as Jason mentioned, you would be using the FDOT's cost estimate manual and then their updated costs from their website. And there's links provided, I think on the bottom of this sheet and also in our packet. And then you'll see, basically goes for the pay item, pay description that you get from that quantity unit, and then you'll see two columns, two main ones. FHWA participating, so items that are eligible to be reimbursed, and then ones that are non-participating, so that's going to be borne by the locals. We've had a little note on top here, add all participating eligible items in this column, regardless of maximum TPA reimbursement. So what that means is, don't try to fit the total of this column to meet the maximum that will allow for reimbursement. So the local initiatives program can only pay up to $5 million, but if it's a participating item, put it in this column and just know that you'll be capped at $5 million. So if costs, go down in some items, you want to make sure that you're still getting that maximum amount of money. So if it's a eligible expense, put it in that column. And then there'll be some other types of add-on costs down here, depending on the project. So all the lap projects have FDOT in-house support, so there's going to be just an add-on of $5,000 for the oversight there. And then also for construction support, so you'll see a few items that are automatically added as an eligible expense.
Can you show them the links at the bottom too?
Sure, and then at the bottom there should be more information regarding a little bit more about participating items.
Hopefully
And
it's there.
I thought
Maybe
there
it's on,
was.
it could be on the other form.
Oh, it might be another one.
There's two highlighted links at the end of the cost estimate that provide you how much items cost.
Here we go, statewide unit prices. I'll have this up on this one. We'll have the link on the website for you.
And I got clarification on a question that I got previously about when you enter in your cost information, what year do you put the cost at? Because in 5 years, you're going to construct the project, but in year one, when you're putting down your costs, you may be thinking of current year costs as opposed to future year costs when it will actually be constructed. So you should be mindful of the construction year and incorporating the cost of that into the cost of all of the items, the total construction cost, because it will be 4 or 5 years out for the construction. So accommodate that, put that in your costs, inflate the cost so it represents when you get to that year 5 construction, you're in the ballpark of what things cost. That's hard to do, but at least you should at least be aware of that so you don't fall short when it comes time to construct and you fall short and you have to cover that cost. It's better to think about, consider that. Yeah, James?
So you guys use a certain percentage then, like for the statewide pricing, you'd say?
I have an idea. So would FDOT care if they fill it out with present day costs and then we just put the inflation factor at the bottom? We just add that to the Excel? Would that work, or is that to be? Is there time?
It would have to, you have to take a look and especially for the projects that you're doing, where it would be, local agency doing it through lab. Just making sure that, you're taking account for it in your unit costs. These are guidelines, this is what we have, on historical costs, but just accounting for it, as part of your cost estimate. If you put it as a separate line item and you put it as like kind of contingency or whatnot, then that's gonna be non-participating.
So we, basically per line item, we need to mark up what we think to.
Yeah.
So we can't put like a inflation cost at the bottom somehow?
Because that'll be more like a contingency and they'll be considered non-participating.
Okay,
So, I mean, as, that's why we have, you know, engineers sign off on these, so you're really taking a good look at what your cost estimate is.
Yeah.
That way, you know, taking account into, because once we program the project, that's, you know, if you're awarded the project and we program the project, that's the amount you're awarded, right? So, but I
So,
don't know.
okay, so the contingency line basically covers that inflation factor, or inflation?
No, I wouldn't want the contingency for actual contingency.
Okay.
So it seems like we need to actually break it out in each line item, but I guess I was just curious as to, when you look at the statewide pricing, what that is versus what we're actually gonna be putting in there for a unit cost. Is there going to be a certain percentage where you're like, wow, they really inflated this too much?
I mean, we'll probably take a look at that,
Okay.
because that's what, Harry, our consultant, she'll take a look at the cost estimate.
Oh, no.
She'll look at your quantity, she'll look at, and if it's reasonable, then yeah, okay, we'll say it's within ballpark, and,
Okay.
you know, we'll take that into account. Now, if you have it, you know, and we're
Yeah.
like, this is unreasonable, that's when we follow up with some emails, that's when we'll say, hey, this seems a little high, it looks like you overinflated it, then
Yeah.
we'll give you that feedback. But, you know, it's kind of finding that sweet spot, of, you don't want to underestimate your project, but you don't want to overestimate also, because then, you know, so just taking that to consideration.
All right.
But if you have any questions while you're doing your cost estimate, Maya, myself are always available, you
Yeah.
know, along with the TPA, but that's
Yeah.
why we're here. That's why if you come to your one-on-ones with already an idea or already a completed cost estimate, that kind of helps, so we can help provide some guidelines there.
Yeah.
So, but we're always available if you guys need help as you're putting together this stuff.
And it's well worth taking up them on that offer, because it just helps out getting the cost in line with what you expect to pay on the non-participating side, and just clarifying the costs. Because sometimes cost is always an issue at the end of who pays for what. Photographs, before and after photographs, this is something you would normally submit with the application, some aerial photos or on-the-ground photos of this is what the facility looks like today. And if you apply and you're granted the funds and you build the project, after photos, we compare the two, and just shows, you know, how the program is implementing projects and what the results are of the project. And it just highlights, you know, what we're doing in West Palm Beach in the county, and the types of projects. So scoring, let's go to so in the overview, could we go to
Yeah.
the scoring sheet of what it looks like?
Sure, so this is our local initiatives page. You can find it actually from the top here, funding, local initiatives or transportation alternatives. And then the first thing that we have a printout for you is the overview. And if you open the overview, it tells you basic information, and then one of the slides, there's the timeline. One of the pages is the scoring.
So the scoring, this is the scoring sheet. This is the objective scoring sheet of what we've come up with, provided it to our governing board. They approved the scoring rubric that we put together for both programs. The nuances between the two different programs is TA is also scored through the BT PAC, which is the Bicycle Trailways Pedestrian Advisory Committee. The difference is you'll do a presentation to them, they'll provide their own scoring in addition to the scoring that's outlined here, and then the governing board, the TPA governing board will evaluate both of the scorings and then approve the projects according to the scoring for both. Where LI, local initiatives, it's only the scoring sheet, and we rank the projects, still bring it to the governing board, and they have the ultimate authority to approve or deny a project and re-rank the projects as they see fit. So some of the differences that if you applied last year or if you're new, things to know about that are different or altogether new is the first part. I think there's a little thing here for a little laser thing, right? Yeah. So here, pedestrian facilities and bicycle facilities in the Tier 1 bicycle locations. Tier 1 locations are from our long-range transportation plan. There's desires maps of what we'd like to see in the 2045 plan. And so we've identified the primary, the top tier locations. There's Tier 1 and Tier 2 locations. Through the identification of the pedestrian sidewalk gaps, that's the Tier 1, and then the Tier 1 bicycle locations, they're corridors throughout Palm Beach County that are primary corridors we'd like to see facilities on. So you get double points for those projects that are within those corridors or along those, in those areas. And in the interactive map, I have it all mapped out so you could kind of see where those are. If you have a pedestrian project, I think a good strategy for this as a grant writer, look for Tier 1 locations. If you have Tier 2 locations and you have Tier 1 locations close to them, package things up, group things together so you take advantage of the scoring so you make your projects more competitive. If you're getting double points for a sidewalk adjacent to a Tier 2 or a sidewalk you would like to complete and there's a Tier 1 sidewalk adjacent to it or close to it, if you bundle that stuff up, I think the projects will become, your application will become more competitive because you'll get those points. So it's a good idea to utilize the interactive map, look at where our Tier 1 locations are, and consider those as part of your application package, if you can. Yes?
So if I see this and I see the value for separated or bicycle lanes, I get 4 points. However, if it is in the Tier 1, I will get 8 points.
Yes.
Okay, so the 4, 4, 3, 2, those are the regular points, and the scoring is when you do a Tier 1 project.
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Okay.
When you find locations and you incorporate those
Okay.
into your application. Yep.
Mhm.
And then, let's see, a small change, the Palm Beach County median household income did go up slightly. I think it was 53 or 54 last year, went up to 57 this year. Just a small change. And then if we look at the TA scoring application, you'll notice that it is different, and that's where all those additional pages that he scrolled through are all the eligible projects. We incorporated that into the overview based off of the FHWA and FDOT guidelines for TA program, for transportation alternatives programs. They took the time to really spell out all the types of eligible projects. So we just adopted it and incorporated it into our overview so you have a full view of all the things that you could possibly do within that program, the types of eligible projects. So in the scoring, the differences start here with the Vision Zero Action Plan. Projects that improve pedestrian facilities and high crash pedestrian locations, or improves bicycle facilities and high crash locations. Or the third one, improves lighting in a location where bikes and pedestrian crashes occurred in dark or unlit locations. Our Vision Zero Action Plan is a data-driven plan that looked at a lot of data over a good period of time and was able to really distill down the high crash locations within the county over a course of time and provide that in GIS layers that we can now provide, present and incorporate into this fund through the grant funding program. And it also aligns with our long range transportation plan for objectives of safety. So this is our attempt to incorporate the Vision Zero Action Plan into the scoring, so we're meeting the we're meeting the objectives of that plan as well. So let's see, in walking through applying for an application, well, yes, the Transportation Alternative Scoring Map. This is the map or application that I put together. This is just a
Last page.
it's a splash screen is what they call it, but usually there's a requirement to acknowledge the acknowledgement that is written there, that this is for planning purposes. I didn't require you to collect the acknowledgement button, but in general, this is just a resource for planning purposes for the grant to identify a project. So the first couple layers, the federal aid eligible roadway network. So that's the entire network. So that way you'll know, is your project along one of those networks. The second one is the roadway owners. It is not a complete roadway network for the roadway owners, but what we had available, we were able to provide. However, you may know that in your own municipality, what roads are owned by the municipality or not. I don't think there's a lot of choices. Probably the FDOT, the county, or the local municipality, unless it's a completely private road. Next one, the Tier 1 bicycle and pedestrian, the sidewalk gaps, and the bicycle network. So these are the areas. Could you turn on both and then kind of zoom out so we can see the whole scope of? So you can see that this is the Tier 1 network, so there's a lot of opportunity. So double points for anything along these areas, and these are the sidewalk gaps. In TA, there is some proximity to a transit hub, so I put down the transit hubs. And then in TA also, there is facilities that are within the distance of a transit hub of 1 mile or 3 miles, I believe. So that is a buffer layer of transit hubs 1 and 3 miles. So you can see if you're within those areas, just to make it easy. Instead of having to measure stuff, you just put the buffers on there, you know. Now, if you're doing a TA application, the next 3 are the Vision Zero, pedestrian corridors, bicycle corridors, and the unlit locations. So we could zoom out a little more just to see the full scope of. So this is the bicycle and pedestrian corridors. And if you're doing a transportation alternative application, this is where this applies. So what I did was, on the side, I'll just use this. So I made an indication here of what layers apply to what grant. So TA is, I put TA here just for the Vision Zero ones because that's what they apply to. If it's both, I put LI and TA. I just tried to make it as intuitive as possible to make it easy. Especially if you're already chosen, if you're going down the path of LI or TA, you know, just want to make it as easy as possible and informative. So there's evacuation routes. That's particular to the LI because the local initiatives program has a larger pot of money, has a broader scope of projects, and that is a scoring criteria of if you're within an evacuation route. So those are there as well. Traditionally underserved populations and median household income is on both. So those are polygon layers. And if you expand the legend or so you can see, I think, yeah. So you can see that this will match up in the scoring and this will tell you, and then the median household income one is the same. It has the ranges for each. Can you click on that one too? And just expand the table, the content, and then. So there's ranges here in percentages. I just converted them to the dollar amounts to make it easy. And when that's what's, and that aligns with in the scoring sheet, you'll see that those ranges apply, you know, those ranges are synonymous with what's here. You can just click on where your project is and you can see how your project scores and matches up with that as well. I think the last few layers are probably just kind of base layer information of the city boundaries, and the Palm Beach County boundary is just, you know, the overarching boundary of what the TPA's, you know, what areas we cover. And then the city boundary was just illustrative of if you wanted to just zoom into your city quickly. It's just there for reference. So ultimately, that's the new piece that I put together to help with the scoring, and you can get to it right from the website, or when we could do an application walkthrough at the end of the application. When you upload all of your documentation, you hit submit, it'll take you to a second form. It'll take you to it'll redirect you to a different website, which is a Google form, which asks a range of questions that are based on the scoring sheet that just indicate how to, where your project fits within that interactive map, all those layers. That's where you would use that map to answer those questions. And you'll get a good feel for how well your project is scoring. If you're keeping track on the tally, if you wanted to, you could kind of see, okay, I'm in tier 1, I have some vision 0, and I'm in an evacuation route, or these things, so I could kind of pencil out a decent score. And through the Google Forms, that's where you would answer those questions. And it just helps me verify, like, okay, they're on the same page as what I was thinking. Or if they missed this piece, and I know that they're in a Vision 0 corridor, and they get extra points for that. So the Google form just helps along those lines. And it could be informative for the applicant as well. So with that, we could walk through the application. Or if there's any other questions, or if you guys want to take 5 minutes.
No, we're almost done, so we can
It's up to you guys. Okay.
So we submit an application, there's a form on the main page.
Yeah, I highlighted the little links to make it easier, so you know that this is the overview, but this is where you're going to begin to submit an application. And when you hit that button, it'll come to the resource page. So this is the forms and resources that I mentioned before. This is, you can click on these links to get examples of what the documentation that other people had provided. And the very last link on that page is I did some commitment letters, because that was a new thing that we had asked for. A couple of different cities had provided those, so I provided those as examples. And those 2 examples are different commitment letters from different scenarios of a county delivering a local project or a local delivering a local project. So submit, clicking on that gets you to the actual application upload page where you would fill out some of the information. There are 2, so there's a little indication of required that's here. In the uploads, in the document uploads, the 2 documents that are required is the application, the completed application itself, and the cost estimate. All of it's really necessary to properly evaluate the application and rank it, or score it. So really they're all needed, but I only required the application and the cost estimate because those are the 2 core items that illustrate the project in terms of what its cost and what the application is. Yes, Claudia?
Right on top it goes application number.
Yes, and that's just a number that you assign it yourself. You just kind of come up with one, and when I give you an example of the year, the name of the municipality, and if you're submitting multiple one.
We choose, okay.
Yeah, it's just something kind of like a self-assigned tracking item, where when you submit it and you submit multiple, whether it's in the same location or different, on the back end when you submit everything, it packages up all of the application material that you downloaded and the form that you completed, and I'm able to download and access all that stuff under one file name or applicant name, so that the name you assign it helps me identify all of the application material for that project, especially when you apply for multiple projects with under the same municipality. It would be 1, 2, or 3. It's not necessarily the name of the project, but the municipality. Yes?
So there's one application for LI and TA. 2 applications.
Yeah, one.
So
There's
2
different
separate.
applications for each.
But I mean, is there a separate application
Yes.
depending on, okay, so.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not one
You can
application,
submit 4.
Yes,
Yours-
because
yours.
there's different requirements for each.
2
So
and 2,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Right, because they're different requirements.
Yes, so the application is different for both programs, and they are different applications that you would download and complete separately
And you
for
can have
each
up to
application, and you would do applications for each project that you would like to submit. So you would do multiple for either program.
Want to submit?
If you, sure. Oh, so you uploaded 2 documents?
I did.
Okay. So, this probably warrants a little bit of discussion or some clarification, because I was going back and forth between the static maps that you'll see on this page and the link that I provide to the interactive map that makes it much easier to complete. I provided some instructions on click on this link, leave it open in a separate browser. It does pop up in a separate browser. So that way you can use it as you answer the questions. So from here, when you get to this form, if you have that open, these are the basic questions of, are you within a Vision Zero pedestrian corridor? And when you go down, these are from our Vision Zero map, our Vision Zero action plan. These are the actual maps that are in the action plan. I use these just as an illustration, but I realized you can't zoom in and out of these maps effectively for you to identify your project and if you're within a corridor, so an interactive map is a more suitable and efficient way to do this work, to figure out where your project is and how it will rank. And so, again, these are the maps from our LRTP, our long-range transportation plan. So I provided those as illustrations, but I also provided the link in a couple different locations as you scroll down through the map, through the questions, just to make it easier. So you kind of know, okay, this question is talking about this type of, this aspect of the scoring. So you can kind of almost match it up with the interactive map to know that you're on the same page as what the question is looking for. And these are, all of these questions are the data-driven scoring questions. So you can use this as you wish to pencil out your score, figure out your best competitive project, package things together, create a great application, and use this on the back end to kind of package up your application or your project to get the maximum amount of scoring, because that's how you rise to the top and get funded. So, well, that's it.
Jason's going to go back and score your projects regardless of what you scored, but it's a good tool for you guys just to look at. So you don't have to spend hours on this.
Yeah.
We're going to go back and review it anyway. So, and you can score it ourselves.
Yeah, I'm not passing the buck of score your projects and let me know how you guys do, and I'll be here if you need me. Not the case, but I like to give all of this as a resource to you so you can do the research in your own municipality of what projects rise to the top, which ones are the most competitive, which ones are, well supported in your community and would rank the highest, and kind of group them together. Yes?
So I know that there were some questions in regards to scoring for natural features like trails, given that they will be further away from say example school zone or other typical features. So there were some questions in regards to how we would score those areas. Was that was there a resolution that was found or some alternate means of scoring for that?
For projects within a school?
Yeah, within a trail area, which will be typically near certain features where you can score higher. So those projects want to be prioritized.
Yeah.
That we're having an ad hoc committee meeting coming up to discuss exactly that.
Okay.
And again, that's a good point. So the BT PAC, the Bicycle Trailways and the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, has been discussed. They're the ones who sort of review the scoring mechanism and make recommendations to the board about updates. So they're meeting about possibly having some other scoring for the next round for ones that are more towards non-motorized greenways. In this scoring round for them, I pulled up the TA scoring. Right now, what you would get, I think what we added this time around was the greenways right here. And then there's also paved pathways. So those types of things sort of would help with the greenway.
Yeah, for
But it's
us,
still,
and just to clarify, the points for Greenway are unpaved paths. And then you can have the 10-foot shared use pathways score the most points, and then there's also 8-foot pathways as well. But then it's just a mix of all of these factors. If you're close to a school and you're providing access to a school or a transit hub or shopping center, then you get more points. If you're in a high crash area or people are getting hit by cars while they're walking or biking, you get more points and so forth.
And the ad hoc committee meeting is in the future.
Yeah.
Could we
So-
still add people to the committee list at this point?
It's an ad hoc committee of the VT-PAC members. So I think from the VT-PAC, it's open to the public, but the people voting on the committee, it would be VT-PAC members.
Okay, so you could put in the meeting.
Let's see. Can we go back to that scoring sheet? I just wanted to point something out that I wasn't able to map, but something to be aware of is, okay, so you have your tier 1 and your tier 1 locations here for double points, but then further down in the scoring, there was another addition. This one here, pedestrian projects within 1 mile, bicycle or shared path projects within 3 miles, and provide a connection to shopping centers or recreational centers or parks. That was a new scoring criteria through the BT-PAC that we incorporated into the scoring, but it was hard for me to give you the resources to easily do that on the interactive map, because where all of the shopping centers and parks and everything and then doing buffers around it, it seemed a little too cumbersome for me to do, but I will figure that out once applications come in. But that's just something to be aware of, that is a scoring criteria and something to be cognizant of, because it is points available. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. That's it. How to submit the application. So we went through the process for the most part of the two core pieces is the application and the cost estimate. Those will be two pieces that you'll download from our website, complete, and then upload those pieces. Then the other parts are the supporting documentations that you'll put together from your municipality or the roadway owner, depending on who owns the roadway and where the project is, getting that stuff together and then submitting everything through the link. Filling out the online scoring form, that's the Google form with the interactive map. That's the final piece after you click submit and all of your application stuff is uploaded. That's where it takes you to the form. That's what that form is referring to. And then we'll follow up with you shortly after the application deadline closes to let you know that everything has been received. We submitted everything to FDOT, and we'll just follow up with, at that point, yeah, we'll have already been in contact because you've already scheduled appointments to come in for a one-on-one. So I'll already have an indication of the potential project. And it'll be a matter of who went through to actually apply, or, so yeah, that's pretty much it. If there's any more questions, or I think that's kind of.
There's some resources available if you wanted some more information about trying to pick projects. Those are all available on our website. And then last is the contact.
Yeah, I left my card is out on the table. I'm on the websites. You can always contact me. I'll follow up and answer any questions or provide any resources I have available to me to you.
If you had a project that was maybe kind of in between, TA and LI, could you conceivably apply to both? Like, say you like filling out an application.
Well,
Yeah, I guess you could. I mean, we'll probably steer you in a certain direction, basically scoring, but
yeah.
you could. But you just got to realize that you only have a limited amount of applications to submit. So
Yeah, I mean, maybe you only had one project and somehow it kind of came out even, for both programs.
Yeah.
I've never seen it happen
Yeah.
in 15 years, but
I-
I'm just curious.
I can,
Yeah, we probably, you know, talk with you after we get all the applications and kind of steer you in whichever direction, like, looks like it's doing really well for them. Well, not
Yeah.
ultimately, you obviously only fall into one, whichever one you take it in.
depending on the size and the cost of the project, if it's over the maximum amount of 1 million for TA, then you would automatically only be eligible for LI. But if it's under $1 million, then I would say the litmus test is take a look at the scoring sheet and see how it adds up for both programs. If it scores well in one more so than the other, that's how I would be able to make that determination. Is how does it score well?
And your timing as well too, because TA is sooner, the funds are available sooner, so if it happens to be a lap project that's on a federally aid eligible road that's under $1 million, and it scores well, it might be better to shoot for TA since if you want it sooner than 5 years.
But you could kind of double your chances of, being in both programs. Okay.
So I think one of the major points for both programs, or at least the TA, the Transportation Alternative Program, or the Local Initiative Program, if you're interested in FDOT administering your project or becoming LAP certified, a LAP agency, it's best to get that documentation, get that conversation going more immediately, as soon as you can. Because the more lead time they have to look at your project, determine their feasibility of administering it for you, the sooner the better for them. And then, last year we had Palm Beach County step up and help deliver a few projects to keep them alive because FDOT wasn't able to through, for other reasons. And so, Palm Beach County was able to pick up a few. And that was great to keep those alive, to keep those projects moving forward. But it's important to approach FDOT with your questions or your interest in them delivering the project very soon. And they provided some information on the table outside for lab certification. Oh, she has them. And it's a great way to go if you don't want to deliver it yourself, if it's a big project that is complicated or maybe not complicated. It's just a big project on a state highway and they'd be best suited. However you feel is the best fit for the project, it's best to just go after it early. Sure, Maya?
I see a lot of familiar faces in here today, so it's good to see you all again. I do want to just emphasize early coordination with the department. Whether you're requesting DOT to administer a project on your behalf, or if you're seeking to administer a project yourself. Because in order for you to administer a project, as Jason mentioned, you have to be LAP certified. I have brochures here that kind of gives you an overview of what our certification is and some of the requirements. So I'll hand these out. That LAP certification is really a commitment that the local agency will administer a federal aid project in accordance with all the state and federal requirements. So we're taking a look at Title VI, any non-discrimination requirements. We're looking at procurement methods, overall qualifications of staff. So we really want to be able to, the department wants to be able to evaluate you before you actually submit your application. So I'm saying, we say 6 months prior. I know that we don't have 6 months between now and the time that you have to submit this cycle, but I do want to stress that you all contact me if you're interested in lab certification. Let us do an initial screening on your agency to make sure that you're eligible for the cert. And we will provide you with either an email or a letter saying that you're actually certified, you're eligible for certification. All right, my contact information is within this brochure. There were business cards with the other resource materials that was provided. Please don't hesitate. We can also discuss during your one-on-one meetings with the TPA as well. Thank you. Oh, is there any questions that you may have?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, I look forward to the one-on-one.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you all for taking the time to come out on a Friday morning to listen to all this, and hopefully you found this a good resource and an introduction to the program. And if you have any questions, please follow up with me. You can always talk offline at any time, schedule an appointment. I'm here to help you guys out through the process in any way. All right, sure. Yeah, yeah.